Welcome to English Separatists, Exile, and the Plymouth Colony. This is Melinda Klein. In the year 1620, another group of Englishmen, among them a number of people known as the Pilgrims, made their way across a stormy Atlantic Ocean in a small ship and landed in the wrong place. It had been nearly 10 weeks since the 102 passengers and approximately 30 crewmen aboard the Mayflower had left Plymouth, England, to settle lands granted to them by the Virginia Company. Storms had blown the ship off its course and well to the north of its intended landing near the mouth of the Hudson River. But to these settlers, even at the onset of a cold New England winter, the sight of Cape Cod must have been a welcome one. This lecture illustrates the world in which the Pilgrims lived, and of course lived in exile in the Netherlands. Who were the Pilgrims, and why did they come to the New World? Why were they radical Puritans, regarded as separatists from the Church of England? Why did they not believe that church and state was a good thing? As you will find, this lecture answers such questions. Under Henry VIII, England had broken with the Church of Rome, and in the 1530s had established a national church, the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, commonly known, headed by the king and supported by the government. Although the position of the new church was secured and the country prospered under Henry's daughter Elizabeth I, who ruled from 1558 to 1603, the break with Rome marked the beginning of more than a century of religious dissension in England. While Catholics hoped and plotted for England's return to Roman alliance, others believed that the break with the Pope had not been clean enough and needed reforms. This group, the Puritans, wanted to purge the Anglican Church of its elaborate rites and ceremonies. But there were smaller, more radical groups of Puritans who despaired of reform. Mostly artisans and small farmers, although their leaders were often well-educated men, they had less to lose by separating from the national church. Ignoring the authority of the Anglican hierarchy, they formed their own churches, each being independent of the others and governed by its own congregation. In England at this time, such religious radicalism was considered treasonable. It was a challenge to the established social and political order, as well to the religious order. In 1593, an act of Parliament made it illegal to worship in any church except the Church of England. Under this legislation, separatist meetings were broken up and many separatists were jailed. Ministers who preached disobedience to Anglican authority were persecuted and several were hanged. Members ended up being watched for private church and prayer meetings by the local police. If suspected, they were imprisoned. One such separatist congregation in the north of England, Nottinghamshire, existed. By 1607, it had become clear to the Scrooby congregation that they would have to leave England if they were to stay alive to practice their religion. They were unable to obtain a royal permit to leave the country legally, and their first attempt to smuggle themselves out was a disaster. After several false starts, the Scrooby congregation was able to make their way to Amsterdam, later calling themselves Pilgrims. And they discovered while there they were not the only English separatists. There were others there as well. And this group, they moved on in time to Leiden. However, in Leiden, they were discontented for a while and decided ultimately that they would have to find another place to live. By 1617, the congregation had begun to talk of moving again, this time to possibly going to America, where they would build a new society, a society of English culture, and practice their religion according to their beliefs. In 1620, the Pilgrims formulated a joint stock company with a group of investors willing to underwrite the costs of founding a new colony in America. After much debate, the London capitalists, known as the merchant adventurers, negotiated the right to establish a settlement in the northern part of the Virginia Company's grant in the vicinity of present-day New York City. In late July 1620, 46 pilgrims boarded the Speedwell in Holland and sailed for England. There were about 90 or more colonists, non-separatists and mostly poor, whom the merchant adventurers recruited for the settlement. They were waiting in Southampton to board a second ship, the Mayflower. The two ships left Southampton on August 6, but returned when leaks appeared in the Speedwell. She was taking on water. The damage proved not to be repairable, and the small ship needed to be abandoned for the voyage. After refitting the Mayflower to carry passengers to the New World, at last on September 6, the Mayflower sailed alone with 102 passengers. The voyage lasted 67 days and was far from comfortable. The Mayflower was outfitted to carry wine in previous voyages, so it was not designed to carry passengers on such a long voyage. The Pilgrims were the saints, and the strangers were the other English colonists on this voyage. Sometimes this is how they related to one another. The landfall at Cape Cod came close to destroying the uneasy alliance between the strangers and the saints. What complicated matters, they all knew that they had been blown off course. Now 60 to 90 miles from their intended company's grant for settlement, they were outside of the company's jurisdiction. But William Brewster and other pilgrims knew that with winter approaching, the colony might not survive without the aid of every able-bodied man. They also believed that without a system of government accepted by all, the settlers of the colony would be torn apart and dissolve into anarchy. Outside of their patent, the strangers and the saints drew up a document that we know today as the Mayflower Compact. While this original record has been lost in time, it reads in William Bradford's History of the Plymouth Plantation. While using the Mayflower as a temporary home, the men in time would continue to explore the surrounding areas during the daylight hours once they landed. They'd search for game and fresh water. Because water carried aboard ships is often contaminated, the Pilgrims had stored wine and brandy, believed to prevent, over long distances, illness. From December through February, the Mayflower passengers were dying due to the lack of vitamin C. This would cause scurvy, internal bleeding, pneumonia, and more. After the long winter, only 50 passengers remained alive. The Mayflower returned to England, leaving the colonists in April. While the Mayflower colonists were uneasy at first, Samoset and later Squanto would help them with their transition in this new colony. By the fall of 1621, the first harvest, the settlement was thriving. In this family-based economy, they were able in time by 1648 to pay off their debt to the merchant adventurers.